Someone needs to.
Good, yes. Well, we're not live yet. Maybe we are. Check and see if I'm live, Sarah.
I'm waiting for the lot, the thing
What you said last week about John Mark, you split up with Paul?
Yeah. So yeah,
Did they ever get back together?
no, not as traveling companions. They eventually kind of resolved their differences towards the end of Paul's life. You see him show up and try to think of where it is. It might be Romans.
I think it was brought into Philemon.
Could-
When he was signing off, he used, from Paul.
Yeah, he
Mark.
mentions Mark. Yeah, so they resolved their issues, and some people think that Mark may have even gone to see him in prison, but when he was in prison in Rome. All right, let's make our beginnings tonight. Lord God, we ask that you would be present with us this evening as we begin our study of the Acts and the Psalms. We ask you, Lord, to open your word to us, that it might take root in our lives and we might understand it and use it. This we ask in your name. Amen. All right. Good evening, everyone. We are at Psalm 96 tonight. Psalm 96. It's kind of halfway through the Psalms. 96. Interesting thing about Psalm 96 is that it is the almost word for word from 1 Chronicles 16. It's a psalm that David wrote and or sang, we think both, when he brought the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. Okay, and that's recorded in 1 Chronicles 16. It's a song of the joy of God's people. It's a song of God's people rejoicing because they're God's people. And an important thing that I try to encourage people to remember, whenever we read the Bible, these are our ancestors. Okay, not necessarily by direct bloodline, because for some of us it might be direct bloodline, but certainly by adoption. Jesus brings us into this family through adoption. That's what baptism's all about. Is Jesus taking Jesus took the rite of circumcision and broadened it to all people. It wasn't just the male of the household, but everybody was brought into the household. Hey, George. Everyone was brought into the household through baptism. So these are our ancestors. So their song is our song. Okay? You have to always, every time you read the Bible, don't read it in terms of, oh yeah, that was with people a long time ago and it doesn't matter for us. Read it as though you're reading your own family history, because you are. Psalm, the good and the bad, by the way, because there's a lot of dirt in the Bible too, stuff that we as a family we're not all that proud of. But it's our family history. It's how we became who we are, and that's the problem. We're on Psalm 96 tonight, starting out Psalm 96. That's the problem tonight. Today we have a problem with wanting to erase any negative history. We like to, what do they call that? Cancel culture? Is that what that is? Yeah, and I understand. There's things, I just think about my own personal life. There's things that in my own personal life that don't make me particularly proud, but they are the things that put me where I am and taught me what I know. And so while I don't put it up on billboards and say, hey, look what I did, I do pay attention to it. And sometimes I do share it with people if I think that it would be helpful to them to know, this is the mistake I made. Sometimes that's helpful. I can't tell you how many ditches I stayed out of because of older pastors telling me, you might want to think about this. Particularly Luther Engelbrecht, who is now sainted, was a wonderful mentor. He was an old pastor. He was old when I became a pastor, and he had been a missionary in India for 20 years. And Luther's, oh, that's nice, my glasses just popped out. Luther's real advantage was, for me, was talking about the mistakes he had made as a husband and a father, because he had 6 kids on the mission field, and so you can't really fault him. I mean, it was tough, but Gladys and Luther were wonderful pastor and pastor's wife to know when you're a young man. And he wasn't, he wasn't always super happy to share or to have Gladys share, which is often how it was, the things that went wrong. But it was really helpful sometimes, to hear somebody who's been there tell you, And so that sometimes that's how the Bible is that it's helpful. All right, so let's look at Psalm 96. We'll look at the first couple of verses there. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Sing to the Lord, bless his name. Tell of his salvation from day to day. Let's go on to verse 4. Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous works among all the peoples. For great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all gods. Okay, so first thing I want to know is sing to the Lord a new song. First of all, why do you think? But remember, this is King David. He's bringing the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. So why do you need a new song? Secondly, what do you think the new song might be? And thirdly, what was wrong with the old song? That's my Lutheran question. We like it the old way. Yeah.
The new song, are they talking about like the New Testament, Christ is called, a new covenant?
Well, I mean, not King David. I mean, I guess you could say he might be looking that far forward. But I don't know. I mean, from our perspective, we could say, yeah, but I don't know about King David. Is he looking that far forward at this point? I mean, try to put yourself in his shoes. King David, he's bringing the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem, and he has written this song. I mean, really, that's what a psalm is, right? It's a song. He was a musician. David played the harp and the lute and the lyre and a lot of other things, and he writes the song for the people of God. So, what's the new song? Okay, could be encouraging the people to rejoice instead of gripe and complain.
Did they just change over to a new leader at this point?
No, he'd been the king for a little while. I can't tell you exactly how long, but he had been the king for a little while at this point. What's the significance of the ark coming into Jerusalem? Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. I think it has to do with God's presence. Because remember, the ark is if you carefully watched Indiana Jones, where we get all of our best theology, you would know, the ark was where the Ten Commandments were stored. Okay, the original Ten Commandments that God carved onto the stone with however He did it. Yeah, well. Not yet. No, there's no temple yet. Solomon built the temple, right?
But they hadn't had the ark in Jerusalem.
No, it had been out. No, it had been out in the tabernacle, outside. So, so that was the physical presence of God for them, and it really was the physical presence. I mean, not just for them. It wasn't just a symbol. The ark was built to look like a throne. It had like big cherubim that went up on each side, and it had, and it was like a box, and it had poles. Remember they carried it with poles, and no one was allowed to touch it, and only had the Ten Commandments, right? And only the high priest was allowed to approach it, and that only once a year, on the day of Yom Kippur. Or if you're like Buddy Hackett says, you know, Buddy Hackett, remember Buddy Hackett? Yeah, if you drive a Chevy, it's Yom Kippur. If you drive a Cadillac, it's Yom Kippur. If you drive a Rolls Royce, it's Christmas. So Buddy Hackett used to say. But Yom Kippur was the day of reckoning, you know, the day of reconciliation. That was the day that the high priest went into the Holy of Holies, which, you know, which we'll talk about, I think is it this Sunday we talk about that? Yeah, this Sunday in the sermon. We'll talk about the 3 rooms in what we call the sanctuary. We call that's is it called synecdoche, where you name something a part, you name the whole of something by its part. That's, you know, when you call something, we call the whole room sanctuary, but really the only part that is literally the sanctuary is the little raised place where the altar is. That's the sanctuary. The next step down is the chancel. The next step down is the nave. And so we still mirror that, just like the Ark of the Covenant was in the sanctuary, and outside of that was the holy place, with the Holy of Holies, the holy place, and then the outer courts, where the people would gather for worship and whatever else they were doing, you know, bringing sacrifices and whatnot. So we still mirror that same thing. If you read, that's the really cool thing about Leviticus. It's a little difficult to get through because it's kind of dry, but it's kind of fun to read because everything in Leviticus points forward. And if you realize that reading it, and you start thinking about, well, what does that look like today? You know, and you can see almost everything in Leviticus has some kind of corresponding thing in the church today, one way or another. It's really cool. I used to give Bishop a hard time because in Leviticus, the priest has this really cool headdress that he wears. And Bishop was never in favor of headdresses. And I used to always tell him that was when we got thrown out of the Catholic Church, we should have taken the headgear with us because it looks cool. And he would go on, he would say, yes, that was copied from a woman's hat that some pope liked, you know, and he knew the Pope, of course, and probably had his personal address, but, you know, and I would say, well, Aaron wore a headdress. That's a totally different thing. And then I'd go get the fake one that I have that somebody made for somebody here, and I'd put it on and walk around with it.
What happened to this mitre? Does Dean have it?
He never had a mitre. He wouldn't have one.
No, I know bishops, what happened to bishops?
No, he would never have one. He never had a mitre.
Oh, I thought he did.
No. Heavens no. He had a crozier. Yeah, but not a mitre.
Yeah, but I thought he was talking about his mitre in class. So
Not that I've ever seen. I've never seen one.
I know. He said
I wish I had known if he had
because
one.
Yeah, because I was kidding him that he'd be buried in it.
Yeah. Yes.
Remember that, Dave?
No, I don't remember.
Yeah, I do. I thought he had one.
When you mentioned focus forward, what are you referring to, like starting at the back here and like working your way towards the sanctuary?
You mean in reference to reading Leviticus?
Well, you
Or-
said something, everything is focused.
Yeah, Leviticus is, yeah, I said everything is focused towards Christ. Okay? Focus forward meaning towards Christ. So, you know, like the whole sacrificial system. It makes no sense to us to say, how does killing a lamb and throwing its blood on a big stone piece of furniture forgive sins? Okay? Doesn't make any sense. That's stupid. You know, that doesn't make any sense. Except if you know what's going to happen, you know? So those people all did that by faith because God told them to. And what they were pointing towards was the Lamb of God who would be sacrificed for us once, as Hebrews says, once and for all. So it never had to be done again. But up until that point, it had to be done over and over and over again to remind God's people that it takes blood to forgive sin. Okay? Sin doesn't get forgiven magically, you know? It's not that God's not the nice old grandpa in the sky who bounces you on his knee and says, oh, there, it's all right, I like you anyway. He has to be just because that's who he is. You know, that's one of his attributes. Well, if you break his law, you have to pay for it. It's eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. That's the way he set it up. So it has to be just. The only way for it to be just is for someone to suffer death for sin, okay, and hell. And that someone is Jesus, God himself, so that he could accommodate every soul. Otherwise, it would be just, even if you had a human being who could be a perfect person, he could only die for himself. He couldn't die for somebody else. So you had to have God be able to do that. That's the reason Jesus had to be God. But he also had to be man, because if he was only God, he couldn't die. So he had to die and be sent to hell in order to accomplish this. Well, you see this all worked out in the sacrificial system in the Old Testament, and the blood thrown on the altar. Well, why throw the blood on the altar? What's going to happen? What's going to eventually be on that altar? The body and blood of Christ. It all points forward to that Jesus, where he institutes the Lord's Supper. And from that moment on, not that moment on, but from close to that moment on, every time a church celebrated the Lord's Supper, his blood was already on the altar. You didn't have to throw any blood on the altar. The blood's there. Okay? Is that empirical evidence that we can prove? No. We believe by faith. It's all by faith. We don't believe, we can't empirically prove anything. If you went to Elmhurst Hospital after taking Lord's Supper, they would not pump out human blood and human body out of your stomach. Okay? We believe it by faith. God says it, so we believe it. Just like the Israelites. No different from them. God said, slaughter this lamb, throw its blood on the altar, and your sins will be forgiven. Well, those people died a long time before Jesus came. And they had to have faith that what God said worked. Because it's always by faith. God never works by sight, which is what makes it hard. It would be a lot easier if God would just do it all by sight. No one argues that point. Okay, let's see. So a new song. I think David is bringing God's presence back into the heart of the people. That's why they're so joyful. That's the new song. The old song for them, I think, was life in Egypt. These people are still close enough to the event to remember what 400 years of slavery was like. None of them obviously had lived there, but they were like, well, I guess they're a lot like African Americans in this country today. They still remember, from not themselves personally, but it's been handed down in the generations, that they know they have institutional memory. Is that what you call it, or family, or whatever? They have some kind of memory that that keeps it alive for them. They're not far enough removed from it. We're now, we're 2,000 years away, or 3,000 years almost away from it. We can read about it, but it's not like any of us had a great-great-grandparent who was a slave in Egypt. Where today, you can find a black person who had a great-great-grandparent who was born a slave, probably, still. So for these people, it's still a fairly close memory of how all that happened. It wasn't just yesterday, but it was not as far back. I think the new song is also, man, they're riding high in the saddle here. Jerusalem is doing well. David is winning battles. The Canaanites have all been defeated. The Philistines have been pushed back. They're riding high in the saddle, and this is a good time for Israel. I'll say a new song. Okay, God's people are always looking forward to the next new thing He will do to bring us closer to our eventual life with Him in paradise. Okay, we're always looking forward to the next new thing. If you pay attention, from day one, after the fall, we've always been looking for the next new thing. What's the next new thing God's going to do? Life on earth is not a parallel reality that we enjoy separately from our eternal life with God. Okay? Life on earth is not a parallel reality. So it's not like we have our eternal life with God and we have our life on earth, and we have those two things different. They're separate from each other. No, they're all one thing. It's all one life. We spend some of it as physical beings on this earth. We spend some of it as spiritual beings in heaven, and we'll spend some of it as physical beings for eternity. The majority of it we'll spend in eternity as physical beings. Okay, because resurrection of the dead and you know, eternity is kind of a long time. So that's where you're going to spend the most of your time is as a physical being, perfected. Sometimes we have a tendency the way I've put it in the past is we like to compartmentalize our lives. And we have our work life and our home life and our church life and our recreational life and maybe our, you know, our hidden life that no one knows about. And we like to have all these little compartments. It's all one life. It's all one life, and it's all with God. You're doing different things at different times, but it's all one life. That's what Jesus is getting at with Martha. When Martha is saying, you know, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. And Jesus says, he's going to rise again. And she's like, I know he's going to rise again on the last day, Lord. And, you know, I mean, you can just hear it in her voice that, you know, she knew the right answer. You know, oh, yeah, you know, they're there. He'll rise again on the last day. And Jesus is standing right there in front of her and says, Martha, I am the resurrection. And I think he should have said, you dingbat. But, you know,
Maybe he did.
yeah, maybe he didn't. And, yeah, maybe John just didn't record it.
Yeah.
He thought that would have been inappropriate. Yeah, I am the resurrection. Every new song is a song closer to paradise. Every new song is a song closer to paradise. Deliverance from Egypt, deliverance from Babylon, deliverance from Rome, deliverance from sin, death, and the devil. Okay, that's the final deliverance. Deliverance from sin, death, and the devil. And we now are on the verge of the great song. You know, that's what we talk about. We talk about the day of the resurrection being the 8th day. Have you ever heard that? The 8th day? Because, you know, God created the world in 7 days. 6 days, and then he rested. And then, now we know the world fell into sin, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that went on. But the 8th day is now when God rectifies all that. And it all gets cleared away and fixed. And everybody, you know, who has faith in God is in heaven with him forever and ever and ever. And all sin is gone, and all the tears, and all the brokenness, and all that stuff. Okay, so, and we live on the verge of the 8th day now. We're just waiting for it. We're chomping at the bit. Verse 5 and 6. For all the gods of the peoples are worthless idols, but the Lord made the heavens. Splendor and majesty are before him. Strength and beauty are in his sanctuary. You know, when will the world stop chasing after wooden idols? Every generation has their new wooden idols. And you can look around you and name them. You know, all the things that people put in front of God. And every generation is a little bit different. Kind of. You know, not substantially. I mean, none of us, I don't think any of us in here ever carved an idol and put it in our closet and prayed to it. But, you know, if you have, there's good precedent for it, you know, in the Bible. There was a lot of people who did that. You know, wooden idols can't help you. Wooden idols can't, you know, whatever your wooden idol is, it doesn't matter what it is. It's not going to save you. You know, let's say your wooden idol gives you a fabulous life on this earth and power and fame and whatever else, and then you go to hell for eternity. Doesn't seem like much of a good trade, really. And that's exactly where idols lead. Idols always lead to hell. Why? Because that's Satan's goal. His goal is to get our attention off of God. And he uses idols of any kind, whatever they happen to be, to get our attention off of God, in hopes that eventually our faith will die. If our faith dies, then we're his. Yeah.
I was just going to point out, even we tend to think of idols from the old days as things, but even then they represented concepts or ideas.
Oh, Right.
wasn't just an object,
Right.
you know, it was what it represented.
Aphrodite. Some of these people are funny when if they talk about Greek and Roman mythology. Aphrodite or Venus, depending on whether it's Greek or Roman. She was the goddess of love. Okay, no one had ever seen her. She didn't really exist. It wasn't like she was a person. It was the whole concept of love and sex. That was the idolatry behind Venus or Aphrodite. Zeus or Baal. They were kind of very similar. Thor was another one. They're all three very, very similar. Power. They have lightning bolts that they throw down from the sky. Baal's thunder is Baal's herd of cattle. He's riding across the sky. It's all about power, and it's about feeling powerless as a human being, and trying to come up with some idea of who's going to rescue me. Okay? And you come up with this idea of Baal, and so all of them are, all the wooden idols, the gods of human beings are projections, that we have projected out there to serve us somehow. Okay? And the fundamental difference between the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whom we worship, is that he's so anti-human. He doesn't serve us. He doesn't force us to do anything. He doesn't throw lightning bolts down on us, although our mothers might have liked us to believe that at one time. Don't you do that, God will get you. No, he really won't. He'll really let you just do just about anything you want, because he's not interested in having a coerced relationship with us. That's not what he wants. He never has. He's wanted a loving relationship with us from day one. And if we choose to love something else, that's our choice. We're allowed to do that, which is not, the way human beings would ever design it. Yeah.
All these peoples that have made idols for other gods,
Mm-hmm.
is there something that says, why have we never made an idol for our God? Really? Why haven't we made some sort of image? Why, or have people tried to, or?
Well, that's an interesting idea.
I mean, if you're going to make an idol, why not just make it for the God you already have?
The Jews were so against that, because they were so concerned that something might become an idol, that they didn't allow any graven images of any kind in their places and still don't, in their places of worship. You'll never see a statue of Christ or a statue of even Moses or Abraham or anything in a synagogue, because they're very opposed to that, because they're concerned that some idiot might start worshiping it as an idol, and that's the concern there. And then during the Reformation, of course, the church had kind of gone the other direction and created all of the statuary and the beautiful windows and all that kind of stuff. And then Luther was faced with the question: is this okay or not? Do we take this into our churches or not? Do we keep this? And there were some who said no. And they went through, and what you'll see, like if you go into a Church of Christ, no windows, no statuary, maybe a cross. I don't even know if they have a cross. They might. But very, very plain white walls, plain, Amish, Mennonite, plain white walls, plain benches. That's it, because of the concern of exactly what you're talking about. So Luther was always struggled with that, and he always said, art is a beautiful expression of our faith. So on the one hand, we want to keep the expressions of our faith. On the other hand, we always have to be careful about idolatry. So he kind of tried to walk the middle line and say, yes and no. If it's an issue of idolatry, get rid of it. It'd be better not to have it than to have an idol. But on the other hand, also music. There were some churches, that do not allow music in their worship. Yeah. Yeah, it's considered frivolous and unnecessary, and it's a sort of a human, a way of human beings focusing attention on themselves. It's what the concern is. That's why they don't allow it. So the only spoken things in worship, no music. And of course,
Celebrate birthday.
right, right. So I mean, we've all been to churches where the lead soprano is a diva. We've all seen that. It can happen. We know. I mean, where the pastor's wife and the pastor are like the Jim and Tammy show. And yeah, it can get to be a problem. So I mean, it is something we need to think about and be cognizant of. But Luther was always of the mind of saying, take the good and leave the bad. Don't just throw it all out. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, is the old saying. But always be careful. Always be thinking about what are we saying here? How are we saying it? Okay, begin at verse 7 to 13. Ascribe to the Lord, O families of the peoples. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Bring an offering and come into his courts. Worship the Lord in the splendor of holiness. Tremble before him, all the earth. Say among the nations, the Lord reigns. Yes, the world is established, it shall never be moved. He will judge the peoples with equity. Let the heavens be glad, and let the earth rejoice. Let the sea roar, and all that fills it. Let the field exult, and everything in it. Then shall all the trees of the forest sing for joy before the Lord, for he comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness, and the peoples in his faithfulness. So this is a call for us to proclaim God to the multitudes and let people know what beauty is and what beauty is not. What beauty is and what beauty is not. And who are we to say such things? We are the children of God. God tells us what beauty is and what beauty is not. Ascribe to God all that is beauty, glory, and strength. That means that we have to be willing to stand up against what is perversion in our world that is called beauty. So the world will always, because it's being pushed by Satan, will always try to say perverse and horrible things are beautiful or fun. You ask a kid while he did something bad. We were just having fun. Oh, that was fun. Oh, okay. So here are these consequences that you're facing. Are those fun? Yeah, there's a reason why it's not fun. And sometimes it's hard as the church to stand up against the perversion, because very often we get accused of being hateful and mean to people. Okay? It is wrong to hate someone for their sin. It is wrong to hate someone for their sin, but it is just as wrong to encourage them in their sin, because sin destroys faith. And if faith is killed, you're no longer connected to God. Okay? So while it is wrong for me to say to somebody who is in pernicious sin, oh, you're a horrible person, I hate you, get out of my face, don't ever come back. It is just as wrong to ignore it and pretend like it's okay, whatever it is they're doing or saying or whatever, because it's faith damaging. Obviously, some sin separates us quicker from God. Some sin is slow. Some sin is like a machete. Some sin is like a slow working acid. There's all kinds of different situations, and I think as Christians we have to be wise in how we address sin. That it doesn't always call for a howitzer. Not every situation calls for a howitzer. Sometimes it's a BB gun. It just needs to sting a little. Also, we need to not, when we're talking about sin, remember it's not our responsibility to fix it. All our responsibility is to call it to attention. and then we walk away. That's all we have to do. We're not called to fix anybody. That's hard for some people. It's hard for people to say, to shrug their shoulders and say, human beings make their own choices. You know? Hard for parents. You know, I mean, think of poor Art Bilodeau who has to deal with Sarah. You know, how embarrassing. You know, it took her 13 years to get out of school. You know, how embarrassing. But yet he does it. He soldiers on. The psalmist points out that even nature points to the one true God. How can we not? Let the sea roar and all that fills it. Let the field exult. The point is that everything around us points to the one true God. We may not understand everything, but we certainly, I mean, you have to be either a recalcitrant sinner, you know, who hates God, or just dumb not to understand that there is something bigger out there than us. You know, I mean, you have to be absolutely hard-hearted if you're not dumb. Yeah.
I always like to give the example of when we were learning embryology in medical school, all the complexities that happen in developing embryo, and how there are so many like normal-looking people in the world. And I'm like, if you don't think that there's something that did this, that put this together, then it's like, really, you think that just magically all happened by itself? I'm like, it's hard for me to be like, how do you not believe that there's something bigger than you that just, it's always just interesting thinking about that.
Did you run into the, who had the folks, people who didn't believe?
Yeah, we actually had kind of a big discussion that wasn't, it was not medicine focused, but it was like how to learn how to be a doctor. It was kind of more philosophy-based medicine, and it was interesting how many people, I quickly learned that did not really have any sort of faith at all. It was like, interesting.
Is that what we should start thinking about?
Yeah, and just I mean, one of our professors, he was just a straight up atheist, like did not believe, like no matter how much we talked about, like our views as a Christian, he was like, no, I'm an atheist and always will be, and nothing will convince me otherwise. And I'm like,
But
that's
you
sad.
couldn't put the connection together with the medicine and the ability of the body to heal itself and
No.
everything with God?
No, he was just atheist all the way, and I'm like, it's so sad. Yeah. But I'm just like, how do you not? I just.
Well, you have to be a recalcitrant sinner. You know, you have to be just hard-hearted, you know, to the point of saying, I mean, there's a huge, I think, a huge gulf between somebody who says, I have some doubts. You know, I have a lot of doubts about this, but you know, any idiot can see there's something bigger than me out there. Okay? There's and somebody who says, no, I'm an atheist, I don't believe anything. There's a huge gulf there. That's a huge jump to go from one. And an agnostic, you know, an agnostic is just someone who doesn't have any guts. They either don't, or they're either an atheist and are afraid not to own up to it because they're afraid of how people will receive them, or they're a Christian and they're just afraid to own up to it because they're afraid they'll look weak or something. You know, agnostics irritate me. If you're going to be an atheist, say you're an atheist. Okay, just say it. I'm an atheist. Okay, well now I know what I'm dealing with. You know, and there's nothing I can do about it because I can't create faith, and an atheist doesn't have any faith. You know, yeah.
The trouble with atheism is it skews your whole view approach to things. So everything becomes pragmatic. It doesn't matter what you do with it, unless it's some benefit to it.
Right.
There's no higher authority, no higher, it's not that hard.
Well, I mean, it's atheism is fundamentally hedonistic.
Yeah.
How does it serve me?
Right.
And that doesn't mean there aren't some fine atheists, you know, civically, you know, who do fine things for the world, donate tons of money, fabulous research. I mean, there can be some very fine people who are atheists. That doesn't, don't hear me saying that at all. It just means that they do it for a reason other than serving God. That's not why and that's why they don't resonate with Christians, is because it's, you know, and they see it as kind of dumb. Why would you devote your life to serving a being that may or may not exist? You know, they're like, well, I don't know, whatever. You know, and of course they would say the same of Muslims and Hindus and Shintos and everything else, but they think it's silly. It's fundamentally hedonistic. There are some atheists who are hedonistic in a very bad way, you know, and there's some atheists who are hedonistic, but their hedonism leads them into good things. They're doing good things for their world and for their society. You know, so that doesn't necessarily mean they're a good person or a bad person. Just like being a Christian doesn't make you a good person. There's some really nasty Christians in this world. I mean, and that's really sad because, you know, who was it? Francis of Assisi said, first of all, proclaim the gospel. If necessary, use words. You know, recognizing that we proclaim the gospel of how we live our lives far more than by anything we say. You know, so yeah,
I think we're at a standard. I mean,
yeah.
even if the behavior's not there for either side, there's a standard there that exists beyond that.
Right, yeah. Well, Christians have a standard imported to us. Atheists have to create their own standard or adopt somebody else's. Yeah, most true atheists create their own standard. They decide what the standard is. And they feel that everybody should do that. That if you haven't thought through your own standards, then you've just adopted somebody else's standard. Why would you do that? I mean, it's not a spurious train of thought. You know, if you don't have faith, it's a logical progression. Because if I don't have faith in God, I got to explain this world somehow. Yeah. You know?
It's much easier to think of creation than it is anything else.
Right. I'm telling you, we have an easier road to hoe of saying, you know, we can shrug our shoulders and say, oh, it's what God said. You know, why is this way? Because that's the way God set it up. I don't have to think through the whole, you know, why can't I kill my neighbor? Because God said I can't. Okay? Which has stopped me many times, I'm telling you right now. You know, God said I can't. I don't have to think through it. I don't have to come up with any standards other than that. That's it. 10 Commandments. Now the irony of it all is that if you have the opportunity to sit and talk to a real atheist, it's ironic how many of his standards are based in the 10 Commandments. You know, it's really ironic.
And they're not aware of it?
Oh, they may or may not. What they would say, I think, is that these are intelligent ideas that Moses thought up, and they may not disagree that there was a historic man named Moses who came down from Mount Sinai and brought these commandments. I don't think they would necessarily disagree with that, and that they were rational, well thought out ideas. That this is a good idea, you know. Which is funny because then Christians have this crazy idea that you go to heaven by keeping the 10 Commandments. You know, you talk to any Christian on the street, I bet you 9 out of 10 will tell you, how do you get to heaven? Well, you have to be good. You know, you got to keep the 10 Commandments. Or if you ask them, what happens if you keep the 10 Commandments? I bet you 99.9% of them will say, oh, you get to go to heaven. You know? No, that was never part of the deal. It was,
Thank God it wasn't.
yeah. It was just that these are intelligent ways to live. They please God, and that's good for us, right? I mean, we would say that's a good thing. But even if we were atheists, we would look at those 10 Commandments and we'd say, these are intelligent things to do. You know, you want your neighbors to like you? Don't steal from them. You know, you want to get along in your community? Best not to sleep with other people's spouses. You know? I mean, it's just intelligent stuff, right? You know, that makes sense. And that's why I always tell the kids in confirmation, this is the owner's manual to life. Okay, these 10 Commandments are the owner's manual to life. and they will answer every moral quandary you ever had, if you think through it close enough. You might have to, but don't ever think that there's not a moral quandary that the Ten Commandments don't answer. They all answer it one way or another. Yeah, Dave?
I always like what C.S. Lewis said, he says, somewhere we're built with the idea that we know what is right.
Right.
We just don't do it.
Yeah. Right.
Everybody knows what's right and right.
We know.
We
Yeah.
just don't do it.
Right. And that's what God says. The law is written on our hearts. You know, we know right from wrong, you know, right from the beginning. We just don't do it. Danya says, late because of killing ants.
That was way bad.
Oh, okay. I just saw it come up.
I saw them and I was like, we're already moving on. So.
The bug guy was coming tonight to spray. And then, did you see all the ants at the party? Oh, the ants were horrendous. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They were
Inside or outside?
outside. Yeah.
I didn't see any outside.
Oh, they were driving me crazy. Yeah, they were all over the mulch. But the bug guy came tonight to spray. And then she says, sorry, I am a diva. You know, she is the diva soprano. She knows her. She knows who she is. All right, we're going to move on from the Psalm, and I want to talk a little bit about Acts. We're not going to get into chapter 14 yet. But Sarah, could you pass these out? This is the map that I talked about last week. That I didn't have copies for everybody, and I don't know why I didn't just run copies, but I didn't. But that's the map of Paul's first missionary journey, which is where we're at in Acts. And you will see that he leaves. I'll wait till everybody gets a copy. And Shelley's going to post, for those of you who are watching from home, Shelley is going to post it on the website. I don't know if she has yet or not, but it's this map that I showed last week. She was going to post it on the website so that people could look at it, and I sent it to her today. So you can see he left Antioch he went to Seleucia, you know, that's the port, and sailed to Cyprus. You see
I
the,
was gonna hold it for the people.
oh, for the people at home. Oh, good, yeah. Yeah, move in a little bit, yeah. So he left Seleucia, sailed to Cyprus, and then he went across Cyprus.
So you can't see it.
It's like a 30-second delay.
Oh, okay, I can see it.
You're good. I got you.
And then he went
This ain't
up,
my first rodeo using this Facebook Live.
went up through Pamphylia, up into the Antioch, up in Galatia. Then you'll see he went to Iconium, then down to Lystra, over to Derbe, back through kind of Pisidia, Pamphylia, Perga, and then back to Antioch. So you see the circle he made there. That was the first missionary journey that he's on. Now, what I want to do is I want to read something to you about and we can discuss a little bit about these four cities. You can take it down now.
Okay.
Okay, during Paul's time, Galatia was a Roman province in Central Asia Minor, known now as Turkey. The ancient name originated from the Latin Gallia, the land of the Gauls of Western Europe. The Greeks called these people Galatai. When Paul wrote the letter to the Galatians, this province was divided into two regions. The principal cities of the northern region were Ancyra and Picenius and Tavium. The cities of the south included Antioch, near Pisidia, Iconium, Lystra, and Derbe. Paul's letter was probably addressed to the four southern churches, the ones, excuse me, the ones he visited on his first missionary journey. Paul was a native of Tarsus. The main roads leading away from his hometown passed through the southern part of Galatia, which was teeming with Jews. Okay, remember the Jews escaped persecution and went out to what's called the diaspora. You know, they went out of the Jerusalem area, and so they were all over the place, and there were a lot in Galatia, which is why Paul went there. Paul's letter was probably addressed to the fourth church. Okay, Barnabas and Paul began their first missionary journey at Antioch in Syria, sailing for the island of Cyprus from Paphos on the western side of the island. They sailed for Perga on the southern coast of Asia Minor. Then they traveled overland some 140 miles, just so you get an idea of how far these guys went, to Pisidian Antioch. That's the northern Antioch. It's called Pisidian Antioch.
Was
From-
it walking, or what was it?
Yeah. They didn't have a I don't think they had a camel or a donkey. No, I think they walked. Yeah, didn't have a Land Rover. No.
Is always Turkey up there?
Yeah, almost all of what Galatia is modern day Turkey.
How about Cappadocia?
Where Cappadocia is.
Well, this comes down to.
Yes, that's all Turkey.
Yeah, that's
Is
still
that
Turkey.
all you see too, up here?
Turkey goes all the way to where you have,
Syria?
well, Syria is south of there,
Yeah,
but it goes all the way across to the Caucasian Mountains, where Armenia has a right now. It extends
Okay.
all the way, in fact, it extends all the way to Iraq.
okay, yeah. Is that the Caucasus there?
Was that,
Is that the Caucasus when people in their DNA tests say you're part of the Caucasus?
well, the Caucasians is a white race,
Yeah,
and Noah's Ark landed in Mount Ararat, which is
yeah,
kind of like really in modern, Armenia,
okay,
which is, half of Armenia now is Turkey,
Turkey, okay.
and half of its own independent state. But yeah, the Caucasian states, you have, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and it's between the Black Sea and the Aral Sea, whatever, and that's where Turkey goes to, and it does. Apart,
The Mediterranean.
oh, from the Mediterranean, that eastward goes all the way to Iraq.
Iraq is sort of
Hmm.
In fact, if I'm not mistaken,
on that side of Turkey,
I think it even touches Iran, and Iraq is kind of south of there.
yeah.
Because, the Kurds are half in Turkey, half in.
Right. That's right on the border there. Yeah. Okay, from there they traveled 90 miles southeast to Iconium, another 18 miles south to Lystra, and yet another 60 miles south to Derbe. Okay, now here let's take a journey to these ancient sites. Pisidian Antioch. Ancient Antioch of Pisidia is 2 miles west of the northern city of Yalfak in Turkey. Seleucus I had named 16 different cities for Antiochus, his father. Therefore, these towns had to have an added designation, in this case, Pisidian Antioch. So it's because so many towns are named Antioch. It was founded in 300 BC. This is a Pisidian Antioch, and became a part of the Roman province of Galatia around 25 BC. It was considered the capital of southern Galatia. Excavations on the site have uncovered 2 large city squares, partially bordered with houses and shops. In the upper city square of Augustus, archaeologists uncovered an impressive stairway of 12 steps, some 70 feet in length. This led to the lower square of Tiberius. Excavated were remains of its original entrance gateway with 3 arches in honor of Caesar Augustus. Archaeologists have also unearthed a copy of an important document, Deeds Accomplished by the Divine Augustus. This shows that faithful Jewish worshippers lived alongside those who favored the emperor. Also uncovered at Antioch was an outstanding water system, including pipes and ruins of Roman aqueducts some 5 miles to the north. The Roman colony of Pisidian Antioch had some exquisite ancient buildings, including a Roman theater and a temple honoring one of their chief gods, Men. Ruins of churches, along with small inscription bearing the name of Optimus, Bishop of Antioch, during the years 378 to 81, tell us that Christianity continued at Antioch long after the time of Paul and Barnabas. So 378 to 381 is when, so long after, hundreds of years. Upon leaving Pisidian Antioch for Iconium, Paul and Barnabas traveled one of the famous Roman military roads, the Via Sebasti. A paved road was built in 6 BC. Rome was known for its road building, which is what allowed the spread of Christianity so fast, was the Roman roads. They were made of 4 layers of sand, lime, broken stone, and mortar, topped with stones or gravel set in concrete. Major roads were 20 to 25 feet wide, allowing couriers to travel up to 70 miles a day. Okay, then they got to Iconium. Iconium was an important city, mentioned 6 times in the New Testament. The modern city of Konya in Turkey is the site of the ancient city. Iconium was located in a small plain almost 3,400 feet above sea level. The high Pisidian mountains lay to the west, and mountains of lesser height lay to the east. Snow and rain provided moisture for growing wheat, flax, and other produce. Coins found in excavations show the earlier Greek influence on Iconium after the 3rd century BC. Some of the coins show Perseus, believed to be the first ruler, exhibiting the head of a mythological snake-like creature. Other coins show Zeus with a scepter and the goddess Athena with a spear intertwined by a serpent. So you see both the Greek and the Roman gods are influencing here. Another of the discoveries includes an altar with a Greek inscription dedicated to Men, the god worshipped by the Iconians. Interesting, huh? At one time, Emperor Claudius, AD 41 to 54, prefixed his own name to the city and came up with Claudiaconium. This name appears on some of the coins that have been found. So isn't that interesting? Both Pisidian Antioch and Iconium, their primary god is human beings. And that's who Paul's encountering. Not very much different from who we're encountering today, right? Lystra. This was the hometown of Timothy, who we'll pick up later. It was almost 20 miles south of Iconium on the Roman road Via Sebastia. The site of the ancient ruins of Lystra have been verified by an ancient Roman altar that was found there. On it was the Latin inscription Lystra. Around 6 BC, Augustus sent troops to Lystra to capture it as a Roman colony. Coins show that the name of the city was changed to Julia Felix Gimene Lystra. Yeah, poor guys, huh? The inhabitants of Lystra worshipped Greek gods. It was here that Barnabas was mistaken for Zeus, which we're going to hear about, and Paul for Hermes. Okay, so they think that Paul, and that's an old story about Zeus and Hermes who came to town, and some people were nice to them and took them in, were hospitable to them, and those people were made priests in the temple of Zeus. And so that's one of the reasons that we'll find out that Paul and Barnabas are so welcomed in Lystra. Coins have been discovered showing the founder of Lystra digging a boundary line with a plow pulled by a bull and a cow. Another coin shows the goddess of Lystra sitting on a rock and crowned with a crescent. Unlike most other cities Paul visited, no record of a synagogue or a Jewish community has ever been found at Lystra's site. It is possible the Jews worshiped in a temporary location. And finally, Derbe was a secluded town about 60 miles southeast of Lystra. The site was not confirmed until 1956. In that year, an inscribed block of limestone was found that had been dedicated in honor of Emperor Antonius Pius in AD 157 by the town council and the citizens of Derbe. It became known as the Derbe Stone. The mound now over what was once Derbe measures about 900 feet in length, 600 feet in breadth, and stands about 60 feet in height. Derbe was the only town of the 4 cities that Paul and Barnabas visited in Galatia in which they were not persecuted. So that's Derbe's big claim to fame, is that they didn't persecute them. Okay, so that's where we're going to stop for this week. We're going to pick up on Acts 14, where they show up at Iconium. They have just been to Pisidian Antioch, and remember we finished that with them shaking the dust from their sandals, right? Now they got beaten and almost stoned, and they shook the dust from their sandals. And what? Yeah, because of the women, right? And they shook the dust from their sandals and moved on, and so we'll pick up with them in Iconium next week.
So the first Christians were in Antioch and Galatia, not Antioch and Syria.
No, they were in Antioch, Syria first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because that's where they came from.
Yeah.
That's where Paul was.
Okay, I just wanted to get
Yeah.
Antioch's correct.
Yeah, the Antioch Pisidia, that was Paul's, one of his first stops in Galatia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then later, when we get to the end of all of this first missionary journey, he went back to his starting place in Antioch, Syria, And then he stayed there for a long period of time and sort of debriefed all the stuff that went on in the first missionary journey with the church there, and probably rested, because the poor guy, I mean, that's a lot of walking.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about what, 300 miles of walking?
Do you
Yeah.
know how long it took you? Yeah, how long this journey was?
2 years, I think. 2 or 3 years. I'm not positive. You have to look it up. Go look in the text. I'm not positive. In your study Bible, it will tell you how long the first missionary journey was. But
Ask me.
yes.
I'd like to make something I got in the mail today. Regarding missionaries. Does everybody know about the Lutheran Heritage Foundation
Yes.
out of Cologne, Michigan?
Hmm.
Their newsletter talked about there is a Lutheran Finnish pastor and another female, I guess, Dr. Bobby Rossinen and Reverend Dr. Johanna Kojola. And they have been arrested in Finland basically for hate speech by passing out a booklet from Lutheran Heritage Foundation talking about saying that male and female, he created them for them traditional biblical view of marriage and human sexuality. And of course, in 2017, Finland legalized same-sex marriage. And so they could be, their flags are being, they're going to be tried. And so I guess we just keep these in our prayer.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you get one, you should,
The people of the people of Finland and the people of Sweden, people of Denmark, they really struggle. If you have traditional conservative views of any kind, it's a hard road to hoe over there. I have a friend who's a Lutheran pastor who's over there, and I'm on Facebook. I'm Facebook friends with him, and I hear from him all the time. He is the pastor of a sort of an underground conservative movement in Finland.
well, they say here, Reverend Kohala is the bishop-elect of the Evangelical Lutheran Mission Diocese of Finland, a partner church of the LCM.
Right. Yeah. No, this guy, my friend, is a different group, but also a conservative group. So, yeah, it's tough. It's a tough road.
Yeah, they're accused of incitement against a group of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, my friends in Canada tell me the same thing up there. That you can get arrested for hate speech for stating your beliefs, your biblical beliefs about anything.
Are they in jail? Looks like they're in jail.
No, he's just saying that they're not in jail as far as this says. It says that they, they
Yeah.
could be, so in other words, they have been notified they will be trying them.
Yeah.
It's not
The
important.
court of
They
Finland.
stay
Yeah.
Finland.
Stay in Finland.
Courts of Finland.
All right, I got to close tonight, and we'll close with the benediction. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up his countenance upon us and give us peace. Amen. All right, and we will see everybody next week, same time, same station, huh?